Welcome to Business Chat podcast, and today I'm super excited because I'm going to be chatting with an amazing human. His name is Kyle Spyrides, and he is a fabulous award-winning photographer. He's the director of Soul Gazing Photography, and he is the creator of a movement called Decide Your Destiny, which is absolutely fascinating. And we met over a coffee about a year ago now. I think we discovered each other on LinkedIn, and we took the conversation offline and we had a coffee, and Kyle's story is incredibly inspiring. So let's do this. Welcome to the podcast, Kyle Spyrides.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation and sharing with everybody what an amazing person you are. And you're one of those people who are incredibly wise, and it's almost like that expression where, somebody sort of older than their years. You know, you've done so much and you've experienced so much and you've got such a wise outlook on life, and yet you're a young man.
Thank you. If I still fall into that young man bracket, I'll take that.
So, Kyle, tell us about young Kyle.
Okay, so young Kyle came from, he was born in Johannesburg, South Africa. He grew up in his South African grandmother's pub. So my mother was an international model, so she was flying over for a 3-month contract in Germany, and then that extended, and she was on actual modeling sets with the likes of Charlize Theron. Mm-hmm. So she was up there. So obviously when she left, she kind of left me with my her mother, and kind of was raised in this pub. And it was an interesting experience. I became very bold, and I knew how to communicate to adults at a very early age. I was playing pool with them all the time. There's one story where I was sitting in my normal seat, so I had a seat in the pub. This to be honest, this was my first few years of life. Yeah. So I was, I think, about 2 at this time. Yeah. So just wild that this was happening at that age. And I was sitting on my little stool, classic sort of old pub with red furniture everywhere, and my granny was in the back cooking and making everything. And this patron that would come on Saturdays came over to me, and the reason she came over to me is because I was calling out for my granny, and I was saying, "Granny, ice cream," because that's what I'd call her over for some ice cream while I was watching my show. And she came over and said, "Kyle, you can't call your granny. She's in the back there. She's working hard." And the story goes, apparently this is what I said. I said, "If I call my granny, she will come." And then I just went, "Granny, ice cream." So I guess I was maybe a little spoiled at that early age, but my granny really did look after me well. And I would go to sleep, and I'd go to sleep when there was noise. And then when everyone left the pub, that's when I would wake up. So I'd wake up in the early hours of the morning, and they'd be mopping and cleaning, and I'd come and help them, with this mop that was way too big for me. So I guess I had a lot of social interaction for a kid,
So you got to appreciate how hard your gran worked in running the pub and also looking after a little one.
Yes.
There was long periods of time when you didn't see your mum.
Correct, yeah. And my grandfather was ill at the time, so she was really working hard in that pub to look after us. So, yeah. Wow.
So you would have learned things from that experience that you carry with you today, hard work, commitment, customer service. It's all about keeping the punters happy, right?
Exactly, correct.
Yeah. Awesome. And then what happened when you grew up?
Yeah, so I guess I had a bit of an interesting life, early childhood. So when I was 3, my mum came to, one of her modelling trips was in Sydney, Australia. So she was there, and she eventually brought me over, and I assimilated into this Australian family now. So I met, this whole different sort of culture, and that's where we were going to live now. So my mum met this man, married him, and then we're in this family. And the first time I walked up my Australian grandmother's house up the stairs, in lovely part of the world, Cronulla, I was walking up the stairs, And my Australian grandmother said she had this overwhelming feeling in her body that she was going to be important in my life, and that she said she felt like this message from God that she was going to be important in my life. And I was three years old at the time, and she said I had this fearful look in my eyes, like, who are these people? They're not my South African family. This isn't who I know as family. And I was very, very concerned. So it was kind of interesting, that shift of vibrant, communicative, bold, and then you come to a new country, and then you kind of go closed in and you kind of fearful and not communicative.
Yeah. Well, that would have been a lot to take in for a 3-year-old young boy, and you would have missed your granny back home in Johannesburg as well.
Exactly. Yes, definitely missed the family back home. Yeah.
So then you got used to living in Sydney, and you went to school and
Correct.
made friends. And when did you decide that photography was going to be a career for you, Carl?
So that was in my later years in high school. Though, just to jump back just a touch, it didn't last long in Australia. So when I was 5, we actually moved to Ireland, and I lived in Ireland for 2 years.
Wow.
And then I lived in Europe, and then actually for 6 months I went to school in Paris. Mm-hmm. So I kind of had this young life going around the world, but the reason we went to Ireland was my stepfather and his brother went to Ireland, was become an economic hub in 2003, and they went and opened up a whole bunch of chiropractic clinics. And then we were there for 2 years, and my mum and Ward split, and then my mum came back. We came back to Australia, and his family was so kind or so loving that they said, doesn't matter what happened, you're a part of the family. And then when we got back, she actually fell pregnant with Ward's child, and so I was about to have a young brother. And then during that process, I looked after him a lot. When he was teething, I'd go and get him things in the freezer and try and make sure he didn't roll off the couch too much and hit his head. Sorry, brother, if you're listening to this.
What's the age difference between you?
8.5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've got an older sister, and it's 8.5 years older. So, yeah.
Yeah. So an amazing international schooling.
Yeah. Which is interesting. And then obviously in Australia, I kind of went to a nice school, and then we had art class, and I saw these people that could create all these amazing things, and I just went, gosh, I tried a bit of scribble, a bit of drawing. I went, oh my gosh, my stick figures aren't looking too good, and so I went, okay, what else can I do? And my Australian grandparents got me a nice Canon camera, and then I went and decided to do photography, and that's how I first got into it.
And you've had health challenges, Carl. When was it that you got sick?
Yeah, so that was 2 months after finishing school. So, getting through school, I would play rugby on Saturdays and Sundays. So I was really fit, really into rugby, and I had decided that I would become a rugby star. I would go back to South Africa and I'd play for the Springboks. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was just all going to work out that way somehow. So I was pretty committed to the cause, and I was very disciplined. That sort of rugby made me very disciplined with my regimen, with my eating, with my exercise. And so about 2 months after school, I was still going to the gym, still working out, and I was coming home late one night from the gym. And then all of a sudden I got really, really cold, and so I chucked on a bunch of clothes, put a doona around me, a big blanket, and I was watching Independence Day, so I was just like kind of shivering with all these clothes. And then all of a sudden, a split second later, I got really hot, and then I just went stark naked, sitting down on the couch. Next night, went to get some ice from the freezer, and then I collapsed on the ground. And I laid there, felt like 20 minutes, but I don't know how long I laid there, but I was fully conscious, but I just couldn't move my body. And then so bit by bit, I started to get more and more sick. I was taken to doctor. Doctor said, looks like you got gastro, take these pills. Went home, took the pills, vomited it up, and then that's when I went, okay, something's seriously wrong here. And then I eventually got taken to my uncle down in Cronulla, and he looked at me and said, you look like you got a virus. You are very sick, you need to go to a doctor. If the doctor doesn't send you to the hospital, you need to take Carl to the hospital, guys. And then I went to a doctor, and this was a lovely old Chinese man, lovely doctor that I had for many years. Years earlier, when I was going through some hard times, he gave me this book called Hope, titled Hope, and it had all these texts and everything. So he was a very attentive doctor. And he grabbed my hands and my fingers, and he said, see these red dots on the tips of your fingers. He said 10 years ago when I was, in the hospital looking after patients and learning more about my trade, I noticed these dots, and what it means is that you've got an infection on your heart. And so I went into the hospital. I got put into an ambulance, went to the hospital. Then when I was at the hospital, I was kind of kept somewhere, and then I said, I need to go to the toilet. Nurse came over, looked at my papers and said, what the hell, what are you doing here? You're supposed to go straight through to emergency, straight through to see the prof, because, your organs are shutting down. That's why you can't excrete. So got shifted along again, and then I saw this prof, and he said, Kyle, we're going to put you to sleep now. He's going to put this pipe down your throat. And I was so sick at the time that, you can't really register emotions. You're just so groggy and sick. Okay, sure. That sounds like a good plan, And then I was put to sleep. And yeah, my family were told that, like, most likely I wouldn't make it through the night, that I had a 3 centimeter bug eating a hole into my heart. And yeah, that they suggest that we operate, but either way, they don't know what's, if I'll make it through. So there was a lot to take in. And then my mother did something that I'm very grateful for. She called my stepfather and told him everything and spoke to him and said, this is the situation. What should we do? And he said, obviously you're there. You've got to make the call with all the information, all the data you've got. But to me, it sounds like he's too weak to operate. And so my mother had to make a decision. And then through the night, they said, no, don't operate. So I was in this induced coma, and I woke up about a week later. And then my stepdad was flown over. So he came over, and then he said to me, he had a serious look on his face, and usually he didn't have that serious look, so I knew something was definitely wrong. And he said, Kyle, entering the hospital with what you had about a 33% chance of surviving. And I said, okay, wow. And he said, look, but you've got this bug in your heart, and if you just sign this paperwork, you can go through, have the operation. Now, what's involved in the operation is that they're going to cut a chunk of your heart off, put a metal attachment on your heart. And then 18-year-old again thinking, and so you're going to have to take these drugs. This is how your life's going to be impacted. You can't do this, can't do this, can't do this. I just went, wow, like this is not Springboks rugby.
No, that would have been so much to take in, having been sick and been misdiagnosed and ended up in hospital and your family rallying around, and then that dream of that rugby career, well, that was definitely off the table, and then having to have drugs for the rest of your life and change your whole outlook.
Yeah,
Wow.
it definitely took a turn. Yeah, and I mean, I think we were just playing catch up, with information. It was just
things happen fast. Decisions had to be made, and great that doctor was able to recognise that spotting on your fingers.
The devil's in the details, hey?
Yeah. So you had the surgery and then a long period of rehabilitation.
So what happened, and this is where it kind of, the story takes a bit of a how should I say, unique turn.
Yeah.
So that was the option for the surgery, and my stepfather said there is another alternative, and I said, what is it? He said there's this thing called the alkaline diet. I said, what's that? And my nutritional understanding was protein and weights, like for rugby, like have so many eggs and that sort of thing. He said the alkaline diet, basically what it is you're changing the ecosystem of your body so that bug is driven out, that it dies off. And the theory behind it is that if you have majorly alkaline balancing foods, and you bring your system from acidic up to the pH scale 7, 8, like towards alkaline, probably 7 more, and you change the environment, that bug's got nothing to sustain it. It's got no sugar, it's got nothing to sustain it in the body, and it will die off. And I said, okay, wow, that's a lot to take in, and I had no understanding. Obviously, at school, I wasn't taught this. I had no other knowledge of this, and I just went. I had to debrief for a minute, and I said, "Look, I trust you." And I think at the end of the day, it was one of the decisions where I trusted the man, I trusted the person. I said, "Do you believe it can work?" And he said, "I believe it can work, but it's taking a chance, obviously." And then so we made that call, and then it was, he handed me a beetroot juice. I nearly spat that thing out. He handed me a bunch of vitamins. He started showing me how to do visualizations and taught me about where the valves were on the heart, everything about the heart, so I could get more connected with it. I did meditations, all these sorts of different things, and for about 3 weeks whilst I was in the hospital. And then at the 3-week mark, the first time the cardiologist came in, he said, we were pressing him. He said, okay, look, if it gets to 0.5 centimeters, the bugs are non-issue. So from 3 centimeters to 0.5. Then a couple of weeks went on, tumultuous time in the hospital. And then he said, he came back in, and then we pressed him, and we finally got the answer. It said it's at 0.2 centimeters. And so, the bug had become a non-issue, and we were overjoyed. And then I left the hospital, and we got him rid of the bug, but the valve wasn't closing properly. It was leaking a lot of blood. So that wasn't the end of the story. And so I left the hospital, and we didn't have a good relationship with that cardiologist. So as I left, the register came down, and I'd made good friends with the register, and he said, grabbed my shoulder, he said, look, Kyle, I'm here to deliver a message. I said, I'm going now. And he said, look, I just want to let you know that your lungs are going to be full of blood, choked to death within 2 months of leaving. I just remember crying and just waving the person in the wheelchair, like pushing me in the wheelchair, just get me out of here. And we eventually went to another cardiologist, and I had 0% chance of repairing my valve whilst I was in the hospital, and he said straight off the bat that I had about 30% chance. I had maybe like a month or 2 out of the hospital and just resting and trying to get my health back in order. Then I kept going back to him every few months. And then at about the year mark, he said, look, you've actually got about a 70% chance of repairing your heart valve now. So I said, okay, look, I called Ward, my stepfather, what do we do? He said, what do you want to do? I said, I think it's time to go and have the surgery. And then so I went in and had open heart surgery, had the valve repaired. I actually woke up screaming, repair, replacement, screaming. And someone came over, grabbed my hand and said, Kyle, it's a repair. And then I just started mouthing off and swearing because I was like so happy. Like, this is, swear word, awesome. So so I had that repair, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And then,
what age were you at this point?
So at this point I was 20. So I had when I got sick, I also had my 19th birthday in hospital. So it was about over a year sort of timeline to get the heart repaired. And then when they went in, what they do is they cut your heart open, and there's electro signals that signal the heart to pump blood through the atrium out of the ventrum, so pumping blood. And they believe they must have nicked one of them because I developed heart block straight after. And then about a week later they said, all right, we're going to have to put a pacemaker in. So it doesn't end like when you have any insertion into your body, like any cut, especially for your heart. It's such a it's the one organ that's consistently moving.
Yeah. So you then got back into health and decided to move into photography, and you trained as a photographer. Now your business is called Soul Gazing Photography, which is just awesome. And you specialise in portraits, but it's not just any portraits. Your style of photography is really special and really unique. So who inspires you? Tell us about your photography and why it's different.
Yeah, for sure. So after that sort of gap of the health thing, I kind of went back into where do I want to go? What do I want in my life? What's the journey? And I had quite a few people press me like, why don't you do photography? Why don't you do photography? And it was actually a year after all those procedures. I was in Ireland, on the west coast of Ireland, staying with my stepfather, and I was going down to the beach all the time taking photographs. And he said, why don't you do photography like as a career? And I kind of laughed at him. I'm like, what do you mean photography as like to make money, to create, to have a house, to like, what are you talking about? And he said, your uncle. And so my uncle, obviously not blood related, but my Australian uncle, he was a famous photographer, like Australia, like very well known. And so I went, okay, good point. I studied at the TAFE that he studied at, all those years ago, and did a diploma of photo imaging. And it was just wonderful. It's just kind of being open, like just having this this experience. It's like you're going to like Wonderland. Like you're learning something new every day, and you're diving deeper into this. And just I think that passion of learning and implementing is just such an exciting path to take. So I did that for about a year, and then I got into it wanting to be a landscape photographer and a fine art photographer, which is very much economically going to be challenging. So I learned quickly. Okay, I'm going to have to learn how to have a business as well as photography. And for my graduating piece of work, I decided to capture the essence and soul of people. I went, I want to keep the lighting like the same, so natural light, the location the same, so all in my grandparents' house because that's where I was living, and the people are going to be all of my Australian family. And so I would go and I would sit with them in a location, and I would just talk to them. And I would talk and talk and talk, and I would be asking them questions, kind of like this podcast, asking questions, finding out more, and then eventually the veil would drop. The pretense, the kind of the fact that I was there and the camera was there would go out of their mind. And I always believed that there was a split second where they would go deep within their soul. They would go deep inside themselves, and they would be, either in deep thought or lost or just kind of, there'd be that gap of time where I could capture their soul. And then I would take the photograph in that moment, and then I believed I would capture their soul. So, going on years and years later, when my grandfather passed away, the whole family said, and I was in Sydney at the time, where's that photo of Clivey that you took? I said, it's on my hard drive. You need to find it. And I was like, is there not another photo we can use? And I said, no, that is Clivey. That's him. When we see that photo, it feels like he's here with us. Like that's his essence. That's his character. That's his observing nature, the architect, the beret, everything about that shot. That's him. So that's the kind of photography that I focus on.
Wow. So in order to be able to get people to open up, they've got to feel obviously really relaxed and trusting. So how do you, obviously you've been photography and family a lot, but with clients then you might just meet them, you might have a conversation and then you go on a shoot. So what do you do to make people feel relaxed so that they can open up and then you can capture their soul?
Great question. And question that comes up a bit. I think it comes down to resonance, and I've got to find out. Obviously, it's not a family member who I've spent many, many years with, but I did choose a challenging subject matter because my grandparents, they didn't have many photographs taken from them. So as soon as I was taking photographs, they'd say, "Is this enough now? Is enough now?" It's very different to the generation now, where it's like you can't take enough. Yeah, exactly. Keep taking. So for me, I think it's really building that relationship, and that sort of energy exchange where you're in that person's energy, and maybe they do come to you anxious or they're busy or something has happened in their life, and just kind of calming that energy down, creating that space for them to kind of be in that space, be comfortable in that space, especially if we're shooting outside and the person doesn't necessarily like the way they look, and so, lots of humor, self-deprecating humor, things that just disarm the kind of who are you? I don't trust you. I'm not sure about this. Why did I decide to do this? My boss told me to do this. My husband told me to do this. So it's kind of anything that kind of breaks down those barriers. And then just finding that resonance. And then I think what really opens people up is putting the limelight on them and getting them to talk about their story. Why'd you get into accounting? Or, what was it that kind of made you create your own business? Because that's a huge thing. And just kind of bit by bit, you're getting them to kind of go into themselves, and then I want them to be able to pull something out of themselves for that shot.
So it's really storytelling. It's storytelling with a camera. So it's more than, I'm used to, turn here, turn there, sit down, stand up. This is like directional photography, and I do what I'm told. I don't mind the camera these days, probably because I've sort of come to that place at my age of more self-acceptance.
Yes.
But your style is really very different. So you're patient. You've got to wait for that moment where people sort of almost like drop their guard. I've seen some of your photographs and they are authentic and raw, and they're not about making people look 20 years younger through fuzzy lenses and smoke and mirrors and Photoshop. It's about catching essence of people, personalities of people. And when you look at your photos, you can almost feel and see and imagine that person's life. A lot of your subjects are mature people, older people. And I love that because we often see young, beautiful women being photographed, but our senior people have got these amazing stories and amazing lives. And as you say, maybe you haven't had many photos taken of them. Yes. So to be able to get them to open up and share their stories as well. Do you capture their stories?
So that was another project of mine that I really was gung-ho about, especially as my grandfather was starting to get sick. So he had a lot of problems. He had problems with breathing, and his lungs towards the later part of his life, and he wasn't doing too well. So I kept flying over to Sydney to kind of capture his story and sit down with him and my grandmother and just get them together. And sometimes it would be literally moving them from the bed to somewhere where they were sitting and going, okay, I'm not going to move you. You guys are in your gowns. This looks lovely. I'm going to move everything around you to try and capture this. And every time I would sit them down and, like I said, again, put the limelight on them and ask them questions, I would get the most incredible answers. So one of the questions that I asked, so I said, okay, so Clive, you're in your 90s now, and you, to be fair, you haven't had many hospital visits. You don't have any medications you have to take. You seem to live pretty healthy, and up until your late 70s, you were out there kayaking on the water. So what's your secret? What's the secret juice? So he said to me, he goes being social. And I thought, wow, what, because he would be the guy that would always finish the salads on the plate. He wouldn't eat lots of meat or oily foods or salty foods. He'd eat lots of vegetable sort of foods, and he seemed to enjoy it. So he would eat a carrot and a celery stick, and he'd be, I'm having the time of my life. So but being social was his kind of answer. And he said, you can't be there, sitting at home looking at your fingernails. Kind of, you got to get social, get connected to people, be in the community. And and then he told me about his life, how they would always, if someone was looking after their kids, they would go and look after that person's kids, and then they'd be over at this this gathering and that gathering. And I was like, wow, they were very community based and social interactive. That really surprised me. And another time that really surprised me in terms of capturing elderly people's stories was I asked him, just a simple question. Oh, what do you remember about your parents? And so I was going to ask him, and then my grandma after. I said, what do you remember about your parents? And he just threw me off course once again. And he said, they never leave you. I went, what? He said, yeah, your parents are always with you. They're in your mannerisms, they're in your behaviors, they're in your thoughts. They're in the way that you kind of you think about life and approach life, and they're there with you, Carl. They never leave you. And I was like, wow, that's such a heartwarming, comment.
Yeah.
And he just had this smile and this surety, yep, this is truth. I know it. This is what is real. They're with me. My parents are with me. And so
beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful thought.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's move on and tell us about Decide Your Destiny. What's that movement? What is it that you're creating? Why are you creating it? And the ultimate question is, how are you leaving the world a better place?
Wow. There's some beautiful questions there. The Decide Your Destiny came from my grandfather again. So I was sitting on the couch, and this was when I was 18, and it was, not long before I actually got sick at that time. So I was just sitting on the couch with him, and we were just in the lounge room, and the sun just started it was kissing the side of his face as he turned towards me, and he just had this big boyish smile, and he just said, decide your destiny. Now, we weren't talking about anything. We were just sitting on the couch. It was one of those moments where you're just sitting in silence, and he just said, decide your destiny. I said, what? He said, decide your destiny. I said, what do you mean, Clive? What are you talking about? He said, make sure whatever you do in your life that you decide your destiny. And to be fair, this man is the happiest person I've ever met in my life. He just always had this joyous smile. He was always, happy, loving every part of life. If all he had for lunch was his banana sandwich, he was on the clouds. He was a happy man. So, yeah, so I think that phrase that he said run through me in my much later years. And then, I really started investigating and going, oh, how did I decide my destiny? I went, oh, okay. When I was sick, I had these options: go have the surgery straight away, try this alkaline thing, heal my heart as much as I can, and then go and have the surgery later. And then, so I had all these decisions that kept coming in my life, where I lived, where I wanted to go. And I realized a lot of it was me deciding my destiny, me taking action.
You'd already been doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So I went, okay, there's something really powerful here. There's something that's really empowering and satisfying and fulfilling in your life to feel like you are actually taking part in your life and you're not beholden to something else, and you're deciding your destiny. So I investigated that. I stayed with it, and that I started, I kind of had this moment where I was just in, deep prayer. And not that I pray, often, usually if I, just before I go to bed, I'll kind of just sit in silence and just say what I'm grateful for. But I just had this moment, this deep prayer where I wanted to find an answer that was deep within me or deep within the universe or wherever. But I just said, I've been here. I've nearly died a few times in my life. I've held my grandfather's hand as he's passed from this earth. So I realized things in this world that we're all going to have to confront. I'm not fearful. I just want to get on path as soon as I can, and I don't want to waste time. I want to get on path, on why I'm here, what I'm supposed to be doing, and be aligned with that. And so this vision of this book came out, and it was kind of like, tell your story, put it inside your destiny. And so that's where that came from. And then writing that story, and then doing the daily videos and the daily Decide Your Destiny doses. So that all came through that. And the message behind it, or like how I'd love to leave impact, is just that kind of people taking authority back over their life, taking ownership back over their life, taking responsibility of their life. Like for me, it's not the state's responsibility, whether I have a heart attack or whether my heart's healthy, whether it's up to me and it's my responsibility. And I believe so much in that, and I believe it's such an important way to believe. And obviously there's times where you need help, where you need support, and that's what community is there for. But I just really believe in taking authority back over your life and deciding your destiny.
So each day you make a short video. It's only a few minutes, isn't it?
Correct.
With one particular topic. It's usually you in the burbs, or you having a walk, kind of shot on your smartphone.
Yes.
And sharing some wisdom, some insight, your thoughts of the day, and you post them on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And do you, with creating this movement, have you found that that's empowered others to, pick up their phone and record their thoughts and then share their daily destiny? Yeah,
so one of the most exciting things was getting random messages from people in Chile and people in Europe, and saying, "Oh my gosh, I was dealing with something really heavy, and then I watched this video, and you kind of challenged me in this video to go and take action in this thing that I needed to take action in, but I was just sitting in my own self-pity, but and I was able to take action in that thing." And so just the ability of the internet to randomly connect to people, who maybe you're not intending to connect to, but they're all over on the other side of the world. So
wow, well, that's great, knowing that you touched somebody across the other side of the world with a short, simple video of sharing your thoughts. There is a good side to the internet and social media.
Yep.
And the book is coming, and the podcast is now a thing. So Decide Your Destiny podcast, where you'll be sharing your thoughts, the audio version and the video, as well as chatting with inspiring guests and asking them how they interpret Decide Your Destiny.
Definitely, exactly, yes. And so that's all out there, and that's the part of the movement. And I invite people to comment, people to come on. I'm even with the daily doses, I try and find people. I've even had moments where I've been in a meeting with a client who wants some headshots, wants photography done, and I've said, look, I've connected really well with you in this meeting, and I really resonate with you and your message and what you're trying to do. Like, do you mind jumping on this daily dose thing? Are you cool with that? Like, it'll just be, I'll just pull my camera out, it'll just be a short couple minute thing. And they've said yes, and so
great. So you've got this ability, this sort of very deep intuitive ability to be able to pick the moment and the person and get the story. I was going to ask you, what's the link between Decide Your Destiny and the book and the podcast, the vision and the movement, and your photography? How do you kind of blend the two together now and in the future?
So that's something that I've definitely had to think about and consider, because then it's I think I was listening to something this morning about Gary Vee talking about when he came out, and he was the wine guy, and then people didn't realize that he was actually the business guy to start with.
Yeah.
But the wine was what he was known as, and when he was posting things about business early on, I think in 2009, people were saying, "Stay in your lane, stay in your lane," and so that was one thing that he had to work with. So I went, okay, so this is something that we all have to work with. Like who are we known as, who are we seen as, and I think for me, it always comes back to that. Okay, what's the point? What's the main purpose? What's the deep purpose here? Everything else, social approval, or stuff that falls away. What's the deep purpose here? Okay, so the deep purpose is to connect, people and light that fire inside of people's hearts so that they are, embracing every single heartbeat. They're deciding their destiny. So, okay, how can I do that? And what do I have to be seen as? So with the photography side of it, I'm connecting to people. I'm grabbing their soul and I'm pulling their soul out. So, and then with the Decide Your Destiny podcast and what I'm trying to do, create in that scenario is the same thing. So it's kind of like the ends are the same, and then the means are different.
Yeah. And I think that as you continue with this journey, what I feel is that you're going to be then attracting people to your photography business who are perfect for Decide Your Destiny, because you'll have that crystal clear clarity.
Yes.
And they'll just gravitate towards you.
Yep.
So then you'll not only be able to capture them in these soulful moments when they are raw and authentic and real, but also they'll then be able to jump on and have a chat, and it'll be like a whole soulful journey for that person.
That's what I'm hoping for. It sounds like a retreat almost.
It does. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, like a Decide Your Destiny, journey, and you end up with your story, a little bit more about understanding yourself and why you're here, as well as your beautiful portraits.
Yeah,
definitely a unique business that you have, Kyle.
See, there's the business in you, the visionary. You kind of I love it.
Sounds brilliant. So next step for you.
So next step is to grow this. So I've got all the making. So it's kind of like you've got everything. You've got the recipe. You've got the materials there, and then just to grow it, create it. Whether there's courses that come out, memberships. Building that community. Just to grow it and really, really have it resonate with people and make a difference. I mean, every time I do my daily dose, I'm always thinking of that person on the other side of the camera and going, how is this going to affect them? Like if I ramble on about, my life for 20 minutes, is this going to actually help them? Okay, actually, if I focus on these 5 things of how I faced these problems and then I overcame them, maybe it does. But how? So really thinking about the person on the other side of the camera is what I'm focused on going ahead. So book, there might be a second book focusing more on the heart, and what I did in that situation, and then definitely more community mindset things, that how I can impact and connect people, bring people together. So
brilliant. You do it so well, Kyle, so well.
Thanks, Lisa.
It's brilliant work. So this question for you, think about, go back in time when 18-year-old Kyle was in that hospital bed, very, very sick, facing a lot of decisions, a lot of choices. Knowing what you know now, what would you say to 18-year-old Kyle? Trust your gut, trust your heart, trust what's in your knowing. Trust deep what's in your knowing, and stay the course with that. Because it's going to get hard, and there's going to be times where you're going to, like every business owner will know, there's times when you just want to throw it all in the bin. There's times when it wouldn't be easier if I just worked for someone. It wouldn't be easier if I just went, so, trust that sort of intuitive voice deep within you. That's probably what I'd say. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I like to finish off the podcast with the same 2 questions for each guest. It's the only bit that is scripted. So number 1 question, a quote or mantra that you live by? So there is this, and this might be confronting, but it's in Stoicism and philosophy that
this understanding of keeping mortality close by so that you can embrace life, so that you can, instead of grabbing that pack of Cheetos and sitting down and doing things that you're going to get a little bit of satisfaction in the short term, but pain in the long term, and rather choosing the pain of chugging on those running shoes and going for a run in the short term for the long term gain. I think keeping mortality close by kind of, it helps balance things out. And so there's this quote by Epictetus, and I actually heard it in the start of 2020 when I'd been made redundant from a part-time job, and I had all these different things going on, and I couldn't get to see my grandmother, and there were a lot of challenges going on because she fell and she was quite unwell. But the quote Epictetus said, "You are a corpse carrying around a little soul." And so it's very confronting and probably not the most sexy advertising, collection of words, but it's just kind of just coming back to that thing, and hey, you're a soul deep down in there. So all these physical fears around you, all these things, that oftentimes what we do in humanity is that we have a lot more pain in our mind than actually what's going to actually happen or has happened or does happen.
Yeah.
So just like coming back to that, hey, I'm an eternal soul, and whatever happens to me in the physical realm, I've still got that eternal soul, that character of that soul to look after.
Beautiful. Love it. And a business book, Carl, one that's on your shelf that's sort of evergreen, that you go back to often, that you think will be a great addition to anybody's bookshelf.
For sure. So there's this author, podcaster, probably Jocko Willink,
Yep.
and he, his book Extreme Ownership, which it's part personal growth and also part business orientated and what you're going to do in your life. And I think just that ability to kind of think, okay, yep, I'm responsible for that. I take ownership over that. Take ownership over that. But then there'll be bits that you don't take ownership. You go, oh wow, this dives a bit deeper. And so it really does challenge you to just change your thinking. And I think anything that really moves you out of that victim mindset and towards that creation mindset is really powerful. So that'd be the book that I'd suggest.
Awesome. And how can people get to find out more about you?
For sure. So if you wanted to see the daily doses, Decide Your Destiny on YouTube is where I'm at. The book can be found on carlspyrides.com, and then photography is Soul Gazing Photography online.
Brilliant. We'll put all those into the show notes. It's been an absolutely delightful afternoon chatting with you, Carl Spyrides.
Thank you, Lisa. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome.